can't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Eevee and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. All right, so today's video, I'm going to be talking to you about Gail Simone and David Marquez's Uncanny X-Men. Now, I know we've got a little ways to wait, but I had the pleasure, nay, the privilege of speaking with the writer of Uncanny X-Men, Gail Simone. Now, granted, this was not in the traditional sense. Some even notice I've been trying to do more interviews and talking to people, and in an effort to get an interview from Gail Simone, my timing was probably not the best. Gail has a lot going on right now with the relaunch, as well as the timing, it's con season. So I imagine her schedule is locked down pretty tight, but she was goodly enough to give me the opportunity to ask her some questions. And while I initially took that opportunity to ask those questions, I decided I didn't want to ask my own personal questions. I actually wanted to take this opportunity to give you guys a chance to ask those questions. And I did so by putting a call out in my Discord server, which at this point, if you've never joined my Discord server, it is down in the description below. But at this point, you're too late to get the questions in for Gail Simone, because we're in the present now. If you could go back to the past and time travel, maybe you could make that a thing. Just don't mess anything up when you do so. But basically what's going to happen here is I'm going to tell you the questions that I picked to give to Gail Simone, and I'm going to tell you what she said in response to it. But first off, thank you for the questions, Ernie. I've been a fan of yours for a good while. Thank you for what you do. Sorry this is formatted weird. I copied it from Twitter and it came out odd. I don't have time right at the moment to figure out why. The first question actually comes from Scott. Did you get to handpick the team, or are there any roster additions that you would like to include? She says, it's funny because when people first asked this, I said absolutely yes. But in thinking about it, Tom asked me, and when she says Tom, she's talking about Tom Brevoort, asked me to use Jubilee in the free comic book day story. So she was in, and then asked if Rogue could be in, and I adore her, so at least two were kind of decided in advance. Then Gambit, obviously, due to the Rogue connection, and Nightcrawler's my favorite, so I guess even though I got to choose, to me, it felt very natural to choose this group. This all makes sense, and I don't think it requires any further explaining. I think sometimes the nature of the way comics are made, especially when you work for a major publisher, especially when you have an editorial office like the X office, it makes sense that this is the natural way it all kind of played out. There's another question that comes up that's actually towards the bottom of my list of questions, but I'm going to go ahead and answer it now because, well, it was asked and it's actually kind of tangential to this. Psych7 asked, will what happens in other X books inform the story in your Uncanny and vice versa? Also, I've read rumors that Monet may join your lineup at some point. Are there any other Gen Xers, Husk, Chamber, Skin, that may join the New Orleans-based team? Thanks for whatever you can share. It's no secret that I adore Monet, and this is not the final team, but that's all I can say at the moment. I will say one of the problems with the X-Men is that there are just too many damn great characters. I'm not kidding. It is a storytelling problem in some ways. You want to tell thrilling stories and get all your favorites in there, but it can very quickly become like playing Pokemon and you have to catch them all, and then you have clutter. As for the other books, we all talk every day. Some books are more connected than others, but we are making a genuine effort to ensure that every book can be read as its own title. Some may just want to read Storm, and that is okay. I don't disagree with this because I think it's no secret I have made a couple of videos, kind of formulating teams of my favorite characters in the past, and more recently I've had a little side project I've been doing called X-Men Onyx, where it's like a little small fan comic idea thing I had that I was planning to write and draw. And while that is still ongoing, as well as things I've kind of had to like really sit down and think about, because one of the things that came to mind was who was going to be on the team. And if I put all my favorite characters on the team would probably be like 50 characters. And so, yeah, it is difficult. So you have to come up with a way to do that. I don't envy anyone creatively in that regard. And there's a reason why certain characters get on and some don't.
Okay, all those chicken.
And I know some people usually like to think that it's that sometimes a character's exclusion comes from a place of maliciousness. Honestly, I think that's very rare if it ever happens at all. I mean, yes, it has happened in the past, but I don't think it's anything that like is happening currently. Next question is, how does it feel to be considered one of the GOATs of the industry? This one's from Kingzilla09. Says, "Oh, that's very kind of you to say. I don't know that I have internalized a lot of this sort of thing very much. I still feel like a newbie. I still feel like I'm learning everything as I go. But I'll tell you what helps with that imposter syndrome is when someone you really respect says you have the goods. I've been fortunate enough to be told directly that they like my stuff by people like Matt Groening, James Gunn, Darwin Cook, Joe Hill, you know, on and on. That keeps me from feeling too insecure." Funny thing, a lot of people don't know this, but you know, very recently, just in the last, I believe, few months, you know, Gail Simone put out a post talking about Dwayne McDuffie, who was gone too soon. And she actually talked about how Dwayne McDuffie saw something in her that she felt a lot of other people didn't, and that if it were not for him, she probably would not be writing comics even today. Maybe she would have found her way there eventually, but she put props on Dwayne McDuffie for recognizing her talent. So yeah, I would say that's all very good company to be a part of. Next question was, the analogy of Quotey Fingers Magneto being the Malcolm X to Charles Xavier's MLK has been made pretty often. How do you personally feel about that comparison based on our real world history and the fictional characters portrayed ideals and actions? This question comes from Six Wings. I feel like the idea is lovely and appropriate, but I just read a huge volume of 1,000,000 of the earliest stories of the X-Men, and I feel that that notion is something that was applied later. The early stories in particular, I don't think they really hold to that idea. But as purely a storytelling engine, it's worked for hundreds of stories over the book's long run. And it does remind us that the X-Men are actually about something other than fighting monsters. This is a sentiment that I could not agree with more if I tried. It is something I've actually been making a video about that I've kind of been hinting at and teasing at for the past few months. But yeah, I have long said the idea that, you know, and I don't care what Stan Lee says, God love him, but I know this is something that kind of came out because he was asked about it and he just kind of ran with it because that's what Stan Lee does. He's an ideas guy and a pitch man and a hype man for Marvel. Of course he's gonna just roll with the question. But yeah, that's just the way I always knew about it. But the idea of these two characters being, being designed early on in their phases as analogs to these ideals and these people, I think is largely preposterous. Yes, later, sure, you could make that argument, even though a lot of that stuff came later with Chris Claremont, and he has been very vocal about who those people he has modeled them after actually are. I'll talk about it in that video, not here. Because it gets into a long conversation. But yes, I do agree with Gail's sentiment on this one. I would dare say 110 million%. Next up is a question from Renoa. Love the Final Fantasy VIII reference there. It says, "Hi Gail, I'm wondering if we will see Shogo and if Jubilee will get to still be a mom in some capacity, even if a faraway one, coming from a mom fan. Not right away, but it's definitely in the cards." That is something that's good to hear because little baby Shogo was a kind of a staple of the House of X era and has been a staple for a while of Jubilee. But like in the House of X era, it was actually kind of nice to see Jubilee trying to be a mom. Is why, you know, it was always kind of weird for her to be out on shenanigans runs when she had Shogo with her. But I think it's cool that, you know, especially in this particular climate, it kind of makes sense that she wouldn't have Shogo like right next to her. But it is nice to know that Gail is thinking about Shogo down the road. And one thing to keep in mind, while yes, we know the first issue of Uncanny X-Men #1 comes out on August 7th of 2024 this year, one thing I can tell you right now, Gail Simone is very likely already written up to like issue 7, 8, maybe even 9 or 10 by this point. So if anyone would know what's gonna happen next, it would be her. Next question from Soul Star Sketchin says, "Hello Gail, been following you on and off since Birds of Prey and Secret 6. Are we finally going to see a deeper sibling bonding connection between Kurt and Rogue than we have seen in earlier iterations of the X-Men series? It always feels like writers keep forgetting over and over again that the two have a familial connection." Gail says, "It's interesting because I had no idea how controversial this element is. Some love it, some absolutely hate it. My feeling is it's going to be about the execution. I don't like to dismiss previous stories. I like to see what the potential is. All of us have family who are sort of a surprise or honorary in nature. I think that would be fun to explore. So I think it's kind of a safe way. And one thing, if you haven't noticed yet, Gail is very good about answering questions without actually answering them, and sometimes being very obvious about the answer, but just not being painfully obvious about it. I think it's safe to say the answer is yes. You're gonna see it. It might not be in the way that I think that's gonna please everyone, but I definitely think you're gonna see it. You're not going to be able to say you didn't see it. Next question from Sting of the Nine Ball says, as a native Louisianan, will there be a scene where Gambit is teaching them how to eat crawfish or having him properly cook beignets? I'm still salty about him not putting powdered sugar on them in the first episode of X-Men 97, but other than that, what should we be prepared for with this team now that it looks like the mansion will be turned into a prison complex? And she says, I actually have some wonderful friends from the area, including a couple of Cajun friends, and they have positively schooled me on the importance of getting the food right. I mean, pages of, and we don't do this, and I promise some of that will be in the book. As for preparation, I don't think people will be prepared. This is not just another mutant human rage story. Next question from Symbiote Spectacular. Hello, Gail. I love your work on Wonder Man and Captain Marvel. My question to you is, which character that you're going to be writing intrigues you the most? Gail goes on to say, I haven't written Captain Marvel except for like 2 panels, maybe, and the core team, I have to tell you, I don't think I have ever had a team where I loved the one that I am writing at that moment as much as this team. My favorite is Rogue one morning, Gambit in the afternoon, Wolverine the next day. It's just like an embarrassment of riches. This isn't hype, it feels like the best cast in comics. This one I think is going to be very interesting because, once again, I've actually been following Gail for a while, and kind of seeing how she talks about the different characters that she's writing and just how much fun she has talking about them. I think this is going to be a very fun book. I actually think this might be the most fun book you're probably going to read. I think, and I would be shocked. I'd be shocked if it wasn't out of the entire X-Men lineup. I think it's going to be the most fun. This next question is from Ms. DJ. Says, hi Gail, love your Wonder Woman and the way you write character relationships so much. I'm so excited to see the potential for a more Southern Gothic X book. So with that in mind, how much of this story is reflective of the ethnically and culturally diverse setting, Gambit's history, and Nightcrawler's spirituality? Thank you, and great question. I have been taking a deep dive into both of these things. I think Gambit's history and background is thrilling, and I have some people with his culture and ethnicity, and I have some people in my orbit with his culture and ethnicity, and good lord, it's surprising how little of this has seeped into our national consciousness. X-Men is meant to be a thrilling adventure story, but we also have a responsibility not to just phone in the important cultural elements that are in the character's DNA. Nightcrawler's spirituality will not be betrayed. This is something I'm actually looking forward to because, for one, we don't really explore Gambit's background very much, and I feel like, while yes, we have had some comics in the past that have talked about it, hinted at it, teased at it, and even explored it on some small level, I do feel like it's one of those things that maybe this is a great opportunity to maybe dig into that some, especially considering they're going to be in Louisiana. And with the fact that Nightcrawler kind of, I won't necessarily say gave up on spirituality, he did kind of kick his trademark Catholicism to the curb in favor of trying to found a mutant religion. So the idea of him actually, maybe going back to some of those roots or maybe finding some cool middle ground is something I'm very curious to see how Gail pulls off. Next question is from I Cower Over Nothing. Hope all is well with you. I just wanted to ask, what character or characters were you most excited to be able to decide the direction of? Gail says that it changes every day, but I am feeling deep connections with all of them. If I have to pick one out, I think it's probably Rogue, but then I think Jubilee, Gambit, Nightcrawler, Wolverine, and I can't pick at all. I think this answer makes a lot of sense just based on the fact that, once again, when you are writing something, you do feel a connection to it in a way, especially if you're already a fan of it. You feel a connection to it in a way that I think sometimes will make it difficult for you to choose. It's like announcing your favorite child. It's awkward sometimes. This next question is from Trap God Thanos. How different was the initial pitch Brevoort gave you to the finished product? Was there significant changes you made? She says, I don't think Tom Brevoort gave me an initial pitch, to be honest. He explained where the characters were at the time with Krakoa and all that. He was very helpful, but I believe the story is pretty much mine. But we talked so much that some of that is already a bit muddled in my head. I don't keep track of who came up with which bits when collaborating, really. The things Tom said immediately made me think of survivors and of grief and guilt, but these particular characters, they don't lend themselves to being sad forever, so it's a recovery story in a lot of ways. This does make a lot of sense too, just because of the fact that, yes, when you look at the body of characters that are going to be here, none of them are the type of people who just linger on stuff for too terribly long. So yes, this is going to be about people picking up their pieces and trying to build something new, and in a way, kind of, and this is something I think we do a lot of times, and why I think this team makes a lot of sense. When you find yourself in a struggling situation, a situation where you have lost something incredibly important, a lot of times it's really easy to just fall back on your roots. And I feel like that's kind of why this team is the way it is starting out. You wouldn't necessarily just throw in your lot with a bunch of strangers. Not necessarily to say that, the other X-Men characters are strangers, or that trying to find peace in new people is a dumb idea. No, it's just the nature of the human condition. I can think about when my father passed away, and I didn't go seeking new friendships. I fell back on the ones that I was most familiar with. And when I lost one of my best friends to cancer, in a way, I actually pushed away those people, but I didn't run off to new friends. I just ran off to other old friends. So it kind of makes sense in a way that if the X-Men lost Krakoa, they wouldn't just go running off to a bunch of random other mutants who they barely spent any time with. They would go find the people who are familiar to them. This next question is from JWR 2.0. Says, hello Gail, love your work. What's an element you feel you brought to this book that you otherwise couldn't have if this was your first major outing on a Big 3 book? Thank you. Gail says, if I understand your question correctly, I would say my previous experience with long-running characters, particularly teams, would show that I do care about doing them right, giving them the proper respect. I don't bring my ego to, say, Jessica Jones. I just try to write the best JJ story I can. I believe editors know that and trust me that I'm going to try to do right by them. So in this case, that might mean I have a bit of room to swerve for great character moments, and they trust I will do my best to bring them. And I do agree with this because I don't really think of any instances where I have read a Gail Simone written story and felt like the characters were mishandled. Like, I would say yes, look at her Secret Six to look no further than what she's capable of doing with an ensemble cast. And even going back to her, Birds of Prey, which is fantastic, by the way. If you've never read it, I don't know why you haven't. You should. But she's really good at writing characters and writing people to be what you want them to be. One of my best examples is her Red Sonja. Her Red Sonja, it reads like Red Sonja. Even if it maybe feels like a newer Red Sonja, it still feels like old Red Sonja, because Gail took great pains to make sure that the character sounded, and read like the character. If you are already familiar with her, you would see that similarity, you would feel that familiarity, and you wouldn't feel like, oh, this ain't Red Sonja. You wouldn't say that because she did a fucking phenomenal job writing it. Now, when I initially advertised this, I did say that I was going to have it be your questions and your questions alone. I wasn't going to put my own question in this, but I felt like there was a question that a lot of people weren't asking, and I felt that, it's up to me at this point. I have to ask it, so I'm gonna do that. So my question to Gail Simone was, what was the inspiration for the M symbol being showcased when Jubilee encounters the mutant in the diner? She says, well, several people have said that it's a gang sign, which is not really correct and feels a bit minimalizing for several reasons. I don't mind the X-Men having a militant component, but that's not really what the Midnight M is. It's inspired by the international hand signal for distress. Originally, that signal meant the signaler was in a dangerous situation, traditionally domestic violence, in a way that was subtle enough that the abuser might not notice it. It means I need help. But the X version, the Midnight M, can mean one of four things. 1, I am a mutant. 2, Are you a mutant? 3, as a mutant, do you need help? And last but not least, you are safe with me. I was delighted how quickly the idea was accepted by both Marvel and readers. I got all these letters from writer friends saying, why did this idea take so long? It's lovely because it really seems to mean a great deal to many people, and every appearance I've made since, people in my signings are like making the M, and that feels lovely. I hope it continues to stick. It would be a delight to really add something to the glorious lore of the X-Men myth. This is something that I really liked because when I initially saw the M, I don't know where other people's heads were with this, but this is where my head went with it. It's a sign of solidarity, or a sign to let someone know whether or not you're on the same team, and I really like that. Last and most certainly not least, Gail leaves us with this. She says, and finally, thank you again, Ernie, and thank you to your lovely readers. You all are what it's all about. I don't write comics for likes or whatever. I write comics because I love them, and I want to make the best stories I can for the others like me out there who also love them. It's a pretty great life, I have to say. Smiley face. This part was actually really damn cool, and I appreciate Gail taking the time to answer these questions, and also just for being the sweetest human being alive. Gail is such an awesome person, and I feel like she is one of those people that if you don't like Gail, I believe there is nothing wrong with her. It is very much a you problem, because she is just the most lovable human being I've ever spoken to. She doesn't have a villainous bone in her body, and I honestly think the world is better for her being in it. That said, once again, Uncanny X-Men is going to be coming out August the 7th, so we still have a lot of time to get ready for it, and you'll probably still see some more X-Men related videos coming from me. Maybe some like this, who knows? I've reached out to some of the other writers. I haven't really gotten any responses from them. I know that Evel Ewing I'm not going to be able to talk to for quite some time because she is very, very busy, and I have not heard word one from Jed MacKay, and my opinions on Blood Hunt probably have not helped in that regard. Not that they were a bad opinion, just it was just an opinion. And while I know that I'll be talking to Moreira Ayadeli, who is going to be writing Storm, that's something that's going to be a little further down the road when he and I are going to speak again on that. And of course, a lot of the other writers I've yet to reach out to, but don't worry, I am reaching out to try and get some or whatever information I can out there, and we'll just have to go from there. But anyways, until next time, you guessed it, obligatory channel outro time. If you're not subscribed to the channel, consider doing so. Clicking that subscribe button and tapping that notification bell ensures that you get more videos just like this one, and you don't miss any of my other content that I drop throughout the week, plus my live streams every Thursday and Saturday. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure you click that like button, keep it plus ultra, and sound off in the comments.